Hey church, it's Pastor Sarah. I'm glad that you're here today because I wanted to tell you about how we've been participating in a special campaign called Our Conference, Our Kids. Our Conference, Our Kids, or OCOK for short, is a campaign of the Illinois Great Rivers Annual Conference. That's our annual conference, all of Illinois, south of I-80, and the campaign is to raise $2.5 million to endow the spiritual life programs for the children in our 5 conference child welfare agencies. Those agencies are Chaddock, Cunningham Children's Home, the Baby Fold, Leslie Bates Davis Neighborhood Home, and Spero Family Services. Now, Wesley has been supporting this $2.5 million campaign for several years now, through bake sales, through mission projects, through special offerings, and more. And this year, Wesley Church has a special opportunity to help us finish out the project. In the month of September, we are hoping to help the annual conference get across the finish line of their $2.5 million campaign by raising enough money to be sort of an example sample congregation in honor of our beloved Bishop, Frank J. Beard. So I just want to let you know how we're doing so far. Before we even got to September, Wesley Church had contributed over the years about $17,000. Recently, the Missions Committee brought in another $1,000 with the bake sale at the farmers market. United Methodist Women raised about $2,500 last Sunday at UMW Sunday, and now this coming Sunday, September 26th, we have an opportunity to make one final donation, get this thing across the finish line, and do our part to help meet the goal of the campaign. But we can't ask you to give without letting you know where your giving is going. So for the next couple of days, we thought we'd feature some special video clips from a recent annual conference celebration at which the 5 chaplains of the 5 child welfare agencies that we're talking about had a chance to offer their personal testimony of how important our ministry is, how important your generosity is, and how it makes a difference to the kids in our conference. So take a listen and see what you think.
My name is Deb Pollux, and I'm the Spiritual Life Coordinator at Spero Family Services in Mount Vernon. We're going to watch a brief video now. It's a segment from a 60-minute episode with Oprah Winfrey.
A correspondent candid with Oprah Winfrey.
Oprah, your story for 60 Minutes this week is about childhood trauma. And there's a lot of new science here about trauma-informed care. For anyone who's dealing with a traumatized child, what can they learn from your story?
Well, I think that this story is it is my hope that our story on trauma-informed care will not just be impactful, but will also be revolutionary. It certainly has caused a revolution in my own life. And I was struck by the story because it reminded me of my own childhood growing up in Milwaukee. It's not lost on me, the irony of being back in the same city, Milwaukee, where I grew up on welfare, poor, a lot of negative experiences, sexual abuse and all of that. What's the difference between a really bad childhood and being able to overcome that and a traumatic childhood and someone not being able to overcome that?
Really, it boils down to something pretty simple.
And the answer that Dr. Bruce Perry gives you is relationships.
If you also have opportunities to be connected to people in positive ways, that can buffer some of those effects. And as you get older...
I'd like to know more about that.
What he really means is love. He's a scientist, he's not going to use the word love, but it really is about how you are responded to, valued, trusted, and loved by those around you. So I didn't get it from the people who I felt I should have gotten it from. It can be anybody who cares enough about you to ask the question, what happened to you?
Could you trace back in your mind, it was that person who made it?
I know exactly who did it. I know exactly the moment I started to feel valued, and for me, it was school.
I wanted to be a 4th grade teacher because of Mrs. Duncan. And I haven't seen Mrs. Duncan since then, and Mrs. Duncan is here today. Mrs. Duncan!
The moment I felt the most value was in my 4th grade class when Mrs. Duncan said to me, I was the one who was chosen to lead the class and whatever it was.
So what was I like? I don't really remember it. I do remember you.
I remember you were such a fluent reader. Well, if I had a class full of students like Oprah, I would have been floating on air.
Mrs. Duncan instilled in me this sense of believing that I mattered. And that is what every human being is looking for.
When you first heard that I had done something in life, did you know that it was me?
Yes, I kept it with you without your being aware of it.
And it was Mrs. Duncan who helped heal you?
For me, yes. It was Mrs. Duncan, and then it was my 6th grade teacher, Mr. Graham. It was school that made me feel a sense of value and connection.
You learned a lot on this story.
Oh, I learned a lot on this story. This story was life-changing for me.
Life-changing, really?
Life-changing. And people use that word rhetorically. Life-changing. It's changed the way I operate in my business, with my people, with my school. 1, 2, 3. You say that the most important question to ask of people who have gone through trauma is not what's wrong with you, but what happened to you.
Yeah.
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 So when you see, a church being shot up, or you see, all of the headline-making stories of people seemingly gone mad, your first thought is, what happened to that person?
Right.
Right. What has been life-changing for me is the question, what happened to you? Not what is wrong with you, but what happened to you? Which is an important question, not just for people who have been so-called traumatized, but it's the most important question you can ask of anyone. I can say that of all the stories I've ever done in my life and all of the experiences I've ever had and people I've interviewed, this story has had more impact on me than practically anything I've ever done.
It's changed the way you see everyone?
It's changed the way I see everyone. So when I have an employee who is acting out of line or who is just being a jerk, I don't think, what's wrong with that guy? What's wrong with that girl? What's wrong with that person? I think, I wonder what happened to them. I wonder what happened to them. I wonder what happened that caused them to behave that way. That's what this story did for me.
On your tables are some handouts that are called blob trees. If you don't have one in front of you, look around, because for the next little exercise, each person needs a blob tree handout. Now, I invite you to go ahead and read the information given and then circle 3 blobs. And the directions are written under the word activity. I'll give you a moment or two to do that, and then we're going to share our blobs with someone near us. At this time, I'd like you to turn to someone next to you or in front or behind you and share what blobs you circled and why you circled those. May not be finished, but... Okay, I know you may not be finished, and feel free to take this or take extra copies and use it in whatever way might be helpful. Some of the blobs, as you noticed, are alone. Some of the blobs are being assisted by other blobs. Now, if you remember, Oprah said that having one person who valued her and loved her was the key in her life. Oprah also said the question to ask is, what happened to you? You see, circling the blobs is only a part of our story. Explaining why we chose the blobs reveals so much more. Being able to self-reflect with guidance is very helpful for our youth who have been traumatized. Sensory activities using art and music and movement are also very important in the healing process. The youth we work with have experienced brokenness in many different ways. And unfortunately, they link who they are with that brokenness and claim it as their identity. There is a deep struggle to believe they have worth or anything of value to offer. Along with being emotionally broken, typically they're spiritually broken too. A certainty that there's absolutely nothing lovable about them, so God can't love them. Some youth have compared it to being thrown away or discarded. Families have thrown them away. Communities have thrown them away. And God has thrown them away. So I found that just talking about spiritual truths doesn't connect with some youth. And so I use creative experiences to help them understand they too are God's beloved children. One week in our spiritual life group, I brought in a pretty glass plate and I started talking about how special this plate is to me and how precious it is. And then accidentally it fell and broke into many pieces. The youth were so upset and they were quick to say, "Oh no, Miss Deb, now you're gonna have to throw it away." And I shared with them how I can glue it back together. And just because it's broken doesn't mean it can't still be used and still be loved. So the youth and myself, we carefully glued it back together with gold-colored glue. Actually, the youth thought it was prettier than before. Even with the cracks, there was that gold line just connecting all the pieces of the plate. And then I compared it to their lives, that they are like beautiful, precious plates that God loves. And when their lives get broken, God takes the broken pieces and glues the pieces back together with golden love and transforms who they are into a beautiful new self. The breaks haven't disappeared, you can still see them, but the broken pieces were lovingly put back together and they're whole and they're unique and they're one of a kind. The youth really seemed to get what I was saying. I put the plate in my office window as a reminder. One day, a youth, Katie, walked by my office. She stopped, she stared, and then she came in. She said, "Miss Deb, it's the plate." She said, "It helped me believe even with all the stuff from the past, God won't throw me away. And God can still use me, even though I've been broken big time." Creativity helps our youth understand spirituality on a deeper level. It helps get out things that can't easily be described with words. It helps them see God and God's love for them in completely new ways and with completely new eyes.
Thanks so much, Wesley, for your support and your care for the kids of our conference, our kids, and our church. We appreciate your generosity, and we'll see you in church on Sunday.